not gonna lie to y'all. I don't really need this caffeine. I don't really need this caffeine because I feel so hyped up already about today's episode. We are on episode 21 of Steins Gate. We're getting down to the wire. We're getting down to the wire as we're finishing out the season, which feels so weird. I feel like the second half of the season has just been like just flown by. And I was talking with the moderator about it because the moderator, we were talking about how some people had commented when I was around episode 12 and 13, and they're like, oh, the first part of the series takes a little while to warm up and then it gets going. I never felt that. I felt, because I'm a character-driven reactor, content viewer, writer, reader, all of the above. So for me, I don't view it as slow when you're building up character and you're just getting to figure out who these characters are and seeing their dynamics. I never thought the first half was slow, but man, the second half is like boom, 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 let's go, and feels very episodic. And now we're back to the beginning, baby. I guess the lottery D-mail we're not going to worry about. Because I'm like, are they going to take the lottery D-mail back? I guess they are. Maybe the last episode when they were trying to find Daru and get him coming back, maybe that was undoing that D-mail. Maybe that was it. We seem to have glossed over that conveniently, unless they talk about it in this episode. But the OG D-mail is the one that Okarin sent to Daru asking about Kurisu being stabbed. Now, we're going to talk about that at the end of this comment intro section, so bear with me. But yeah, we have a lot to dive in as far as the comments go, so we're just going to go ahead and dive into those if you don't mind. Grape Rouge for episode 19 says, Grape Rouge and Jake Collins did a little bit of correcting for me about the arc rewrite and the rounder, and I want to talk about that with you all. Grape Rouge says, I think you've mixed arc rewrite and the rounders. Moika is a rounder from CERN. Arc rewrite is some company she worked for 2 days before she quit to search for the IBN. And Jake Collins added, so arc rewrite is just a part of Moika's cover. It was just a reason for her to be in the area while she searched for the IBN. The only reason we even know about it is because Okabe was pointing the fake gun at her, asking who she was and what she did. And Moika, unaware of the fact that Okabe knew she was working for CERN, defaulted to her cover by saying she worked for Arc Rewrite. So I think my big thing that was holding me up and confusing me, just to clarify, was that I thought that the rounders were the names of the employees working for Arc Rewrite. So I thought that all the people she was working with when they came to go and get the time machine and they shot Mayuri, I thought those guys were rounders too. This all clarifies things. So much. So yeah, no, the rounders work for CERN. Arc Rewrite's just the cover. FB is a rounder, just like Moika's a rounder. So good to know. Glad we got all that sorted out. So thank you. Thank you for correcting on that. I appreciate it. Alex Cornejo for episode 20. Alex Cornejo's comment is talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion. So if you do not want spoilers for Neon Genesis Evangelion, just skip until I do this. When I do this, that means I've stopped talking about Alex's comment, okay? But Alex Cornejo says, Mayuri and Kurisu do give Rei and Asuka vibes. It just speaks to how common the kudere and tsundere dynamic is. So the question is now, where's the late-coming pretty boy to take away Okarin's heart? Where's my Kaoru? Where's my Kaoru in this story? I told Alex, I was like, if there is a special guy coming in clutch at the end to take away Okarin's heart, by all means, I'm here for it. Where's it happening at? But I mean, in my mind, I told them, I was like, maybe Ruka's supposed to be the stand-in for that. I don't know. But anyway, enough of Neon Genesis spoilers and all that. But I thought that was really funny, and it really got me, and I wish, give me some of that. And then Cabrica for episode 20 says, there are 2 types of people. One who totally forget about the consequences of reverting it all back, and those who wait for Okabe to realize the harshness of the world. Yeah, I don't always predict things, but I've been trying to keep tight ends on this because you have to pay attention because there's so much with this series. And I was like, I was waiting for Okabe to realize, yeah, we got to undo the D-mail and the day has finally come. Which we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. Bestial Moon says, quote, they were quoting me from episode 20 saying, I swear this has already happened. I'm not going crazy. I need to drink more Dr. Pepper. Congratulations. You've boiled Steins Gate down to its very essence. Cheers. That was really funny. They also said somewhere around, and people have talked about this in the Discord as well, somewhere around a dozen episodes or so ago, you looked up CRT TVs and their creator Ferdinand Braun. You had the answer to who is FB before it was even a question. And seeing those two dots finally make a line is so satisfying, because it's like, oh, that's a neat little Easter egg. And then it wasn't. And I was like, oh, the moderator was like, we're sitting here like, oh God, she looked it up. She found the answer to the question and it's not been asked yet. Ah! And to be fair, all I can say is thank goodness I'm not good at remembering names. Because I do remember looking up the creator, but I didn't remember Ferdinand. I was like, well, Braun's the guy that made the CRT and that's his name. But we know that's not really his name. But sometimes you hit him and sometimes you don't. Bestial Moon also says the still image of Nye waiting alone with the 2 full breakfast plates is one of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire series. It's so simple, but so effective. The pacing and composition on that whole part of the episode, going back and forth between Nye and Braun, was so perfectly directed. Yeah, just the symbolism of there being 2 sausages, 2 tomatoes, the 2 yolks, the yolks being wobbly like the sun, everything like being the 2 of them, and then him not being there to get the breakfast at the other end of the table, the oscillating fan, like all the visual symbolism. I mean, we're not surprised. It's Steins Gate, but it was still so well done. And then Alex Johnson says they were explaining Braun killing themselves because there's basically no way of them getting out of the situation. I will say, when I talk about the dub, I appreciate Alex Johnson giving a lot of feedback in the comment explaining that. The English dub explains it so much better than listening to the translation. So I'm glad that afterwards when I rewatched the English dub, I was like, oh, this all makes a lot more sense. But it basically was what Alex Johnson's comment had talked about. And so then from there, H Banana 7 had this really cool little tidbit for episode 20. This is the last comment I have, where they said the spider's web thread of hope Braun climbing up is referring to Octagawa's book, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. And when they first put Octagawa in the comment, I was like, you mean like Bungo Stray Dogs? And then I had to be like, wait, no, that's an author. That's a Japanese author. But for a hot second, I was wondering, like, is Octagawa in this series too? Are we having a crossover? But then they were talking about the actual author, Ryunosuke Octagawa. I miss Bungo Stray Dogs so much. But they were saying The Spider's Thread, which is a short story written in 1918 by Ryunosuke Octagawa. Basically, the summary as this person is meandering around paradise one morning when they stop at a lotus-filled pond. Between the lilies, they can see the crystal clear waters, the depths of hell. His eyes come to rest on one sinner in particular by the name of Kandata. Kandata was a cold-hearted criminal, but had one good deed to his name. While walking through the forest one day, he decided not to kill a spider he was about to crush with his foot. Moved by this single act of compassion, the Buddha takes a silvery thread of a spider in paradise and lowers it down to hell. Down in hell, the myriad sinners are struggling in the pool of blood in total darkness, save for the light glinting off the mountain of spikes. Quite an imagery there. Kandata, looking up by chance at the sky above the pool, sees the spider thread descending towards him and grabs hold with all the might of a seasoned criminal. The climb from hell to paradise is not a short one. However, Kandata quickly tires. Dangling from the middle of the rope, he glances downward and sees how far he has come. Realizing he may actually be able to escape from hell, he's overcome by joy and laughs giddily. His elation is short-lived when he realizes that others have started climbing the thread behind him, stretching down to the murky depths. Fearing the thread will break from the weight of others, he shouts that the spider's thread is his and his alone. It is at this moment that the thread breaks, and he and all the other sinners are cast back down into the pool of blood. The Shakyamuni, witnessing all of this, who's the one that was meandering around the paradise pond, is still with a slightly sad air. In the end, Kandata condemned himself by being concerned with his own salvation and not that of others. But paradise continues on as it has, and nearly noontime there, and the Buddha continues his meanderings. That's a pretty dark story. That seems fitting for Octagawa. Pretty dark story. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the English dub here in a hot second, but that is interesting with that imagery. So yes, H Banana, I do agree that the thread of hope Braun is referring to is talking about Octagawa's story, the spider's thread, which we'll talk about here in a hot second. So with the English dub, my comments for episode 20 are, 1, Okarin is a lot like Amane with Moika at the start of the episode, just his mannerisms, his attitude. J. Michael Tatum does an amazing job as per usual with this. Mayuri being sad that Okarin is not talking to her, that part, that voice actress, she just sells how like kind of distant and despondent she is. Really well done. Then in the English dub, whenever Moika is describing FB's tactics of persuading her to join, Okarin makes the comment, well, how maternal? Well, how paternal, actually, but it fits FB because he's a dad, right? And then the whole scene where we find out the reveal with FB in the dub is really well done. The voice actor for Braun's like, I didn't tell you I was a woman, did I? He's so calm in that scene, which his calmness in that scene when they get to the construction site makes that contrast just hit so hard, right? Now, before we get to that part here, there is a moment where they're talking about the construction, and the sound design for the series is really well done. Like, you can hear the construction working. There's this constant beeping sound that keeps getting like louder and faster as the scene escalates. But he's like, they're always building. Can't leave well enough alone, can they? And I was like, oh, meta much? Meta much? When we're talking about the series and how Okarin and them, they're always trying to build onto the past to change the timeline and the world lines to build up to that 1%. Can't leave well enough alone, can we? I was like, that's basically describing the whole series. So then this dialogue here, Okarin says, I can't believe you're nothing more than a CERN dog. And Braun goes, woof, woof. Just the way that he did that was so funny. But the moment that Suzuha is mentioned, Braun's voice actor instantly turns, like instantly becomes sinister. And he's like, you coddled little shit. And it's like, oh my God, you realize how much he holds Suzuha in such high regards because, like we found out in previous episodes, she's the one who let him have a home. She took him in. She took him off the streets where he had literally nothing, or she was a part of doing that. I want to know who Braun's VA in the English dub is. Mr. Braun, English VA. He was, what is his voice? Christopher Sabat! Oh my God! Of course it is Christopher Sabat. It's Vegeta. It's Vegeta and Piccolo. Of course. Honestly, now that you said that, I'm like, Christopher Sabat is Piccolo and Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z. Braun sounds like he sounds like Piccolo. He sounds a lot like Piccolo. That's nice. Wow. Okay. There we go. Nice. Awesome. I knew that voice sounded familiar. I was like, who plays his voice? Perfect. Perfect role. Yep. That works perfect. But then Braun says, you think you're climbing a rope, but you're actually dangling from a noose. You're not climbing a rope. You're dangling from a noose, which is literally goes back to the spider's thread story by Octagawa, where he thought it was going to be his salvation, but it ends up being his damnation because he focuses on himself and not others. I will say, Braun is a little different from the story in this because he is thinking about Nai throughout all of this. Nai is the one person he's trying to save from everything. And the explanation that Braun gives for why he shoots himself and shoots Moika is explained a lot better in the English dub. And him sparing Okarin and Kurisu because they have to make the time machine, so he can't be killing them off because that's going to just piss CERN off even more. Although I will say it makes sense if he had killed them and then himself, CERN would have just taken Nai out. But I mean, yeah, I get it. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not going to argue it. But yeah, the line he says there is all you've got to do is die. And then we had the end of episode 20 with Kurisu having to die, according to Okarin. I mean, everything connected really well in this episode. Episode 20, going back and rewatching episode 20, when I first watched it last week, I didn't know how I felt about it. I was like, oh, this feels like a disjointed episode. But going back and watching the English dub, I feel a lot better about that episode now that I've rewatched it and let it kind of simmer for a little bit. And everyone's comments about episode 20, I think, helped me out a lot. So thank you for that. That gave me a better appreciation for the episode. So yeah, I definitely feel better about it after rewatching it. So that's good. And then here's my thing I want to talk about. In the English dub, Kurisu says that Okarin didn't tell her about the last D-mail, but she knows about the quote-unquote being stabbed from him from when they first met. So he just hasn't told her about the D-mail. My question is, how does him sending that D-mail, how does it work, since I get that that is the D-mail that alerted, I get that that's the D-mail that alerted CERN about the whole time machine thing in the first place. The only thing that's kind of confusing about it at this point, and I guess we're probably going to spend the next couple episodes talking about it, is how does them undoing the D-mail change the past? That is one thing that's kind of bugged me a little bit, and I feel like we're going to find out this episode and next week's episode, at least. Because if you think about it, Ferris's D-mail was saving her dad's life. So, of course, that impacts a lot of things. Then you have Ruka's D-mail, which was literally changing her entire being. That makes sense. Then you have Moika's, who was getting the phone, which doesn't seem like it would change a lot, but it's connected to Braun, so I'm like, I'll give it a pass. The only thing that Okarin sent to Daru is someone got stabbed. But the D-mail that he sends to Daru, that doesn't impact them going to the event. That doesn't impact the time travel machine showing up there. That technically what he emails, he didn't D-mail Daru being like, hey, remind me to tell myself to get there earlier so I can save Kurisu's life. You know, he didn't email that, like something that would alter Kurisu being stabbed in the first place. It just changed things a little bit, which I'm guessing maybe them just undoing it is getting it closer to that 1%, but they're at 0.57. So is it really going to jump it up like a 40% range? Maybe we're focusing on the lottery D-mail in this episode. I don't know. But if we haven't already, but it's just, I'm very curious. In my mind, I'm like, well, what he did in the first place didn't stop her from being stabbed. It just altered the world line. And in the world line, it just happened to be that she got stabbed in one and didn't in this one. So, okay. But I don't know. So I guess we're going to find out. But anyway, I know that intro took forever, but there were so many good comments I wanted to talk about with you all. So thank you for letting me indulge myself and talk about those with you. But anyway, that I've spoken enough. We're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive into episode 21 of Steins Gate. And we're going to do that here. In 3, 2, 1. And yeah, I will see you all on the other side. Well, this was a really sad episode. I think after all of them, this is the saddest episode so far. I mean, other than episode 12, 13 and 14 were sad in their own ways because of just the implication of how many times he has time left at that point in the series. But I feel like this is probably, to me, in my mind, one of the saddest episodes because it's really Okarin coming to realize all the cows are coming home, basically, because, you know, you had, and we're going to be using these up here with Whiteboard Coon, like with Ferris and her dad, you know, we're talking about Okarin as the main character, and this may sound insensitive, but Okarin did not care that Ferris, you know, that her dad had been saved by her D-mail. He's like, I have to save Mayuri. So bye-bye, Dad. And that was undone. But it was Ferris's decision ultimately to undo that D-mail. And so it kind of alleviated Okarin from having to bear that responsibility, right? Then you had Ruka, which was the same thing. Okarin's like, yeah, I'm sorry that this is affecting your gender and your identity, but I gotta save Mayuri. So, and in the end, it was in fact Ruka that made the decision. So it alleviated Okarin from that responsibility. Then you have Moika, who was very much unstable, and Okarin was like, well, sorry about your instability, but I gotta save Mayuri and you were gonna die anyway, so let's just reverse it. And she ends up doing it. So all in all, everything that's happened so far has been a situation where the person involved has made the decision to undo the D-mail or has been complicit in that decision, and Okarin has not had to bear the brunt of the responsibility with that choice. Now, to be honest, do I think that maybe Kurisu is going to make the decision to do exactly what all these other women have done? I won't be surprised if she does, but I think I'm kind of torn on how I feel about that, because I think either we have a couple of scenarios. We have Kurisu, who could make the decision to be all noble like the others, and make the choice to undo the D-mail and then basically not exist. And if she makes... Now, the question is, does she make that decision, A, without telling Okarin? Or, B, does she tell Okarin that she is going to make that decision? I think that for the cinematic-esque quality of it, that they'll have her tell him, and Huckleberry has demanded that I throw this ball. I think that for the cinematic quality of the series, she's going to tell Okarin and he's going to argue about it, and then she's going to be like, no, it's to save Mayuri, who I've gotten to know, and now that I know that I wasn't alive in this world line, I was never going to be alive anyway, so it's fine. That's option one. Option 1B, that she tells him. And it's this big cinematic thing, and they like hug or kiss or something. If he hugs her and doesn't hug Mayuri, we'll be mad. Just for the record, we'll be mad. Because we're going to talk about him hugging Mayuri, damn it. He needs to do it. But I could see for the cinematic quality of it, they have a moment and she's like, I'm going to do it. And he's like, oh, bud. And then, they kiss or hug. They probably won't kiss, but they'll probably hug, and then she'll do it and undo it and she's dead. Or I could honestly see it wouldn't be very cinematic. It'd be kind of anticlimactic in terms of, setting this up. But I could see her just being like, Okarin's going to try to stop me, so I'm going to do it myself. Which could inadvertently lead Okarin, if that happens. I kept wondering in this, we're going to call this A Omega, A Omega timeline. It could lead her, if she does it without telling Okarin, will he try to undo it? Can he even? Well, no, he can't undo it, can he? Because if they delete, this is kind of like the last one. I guess the lottery D-mail, we're just going to write it off that we just undid it and that was off screen and it's done already. There is no going back. Once they undo that D-mail, there is no going back. It's going to lead to the beta time, to the beta or the alpha, right? Or, well, yeah, they need to go. They were at the beta line. We're going to go back through it. I might change this. The beta world line, it's going to go back to that, whatever it was before, the 1%. I was hoping that we were going to see, because it jumped up to 0.57 with the Moeka thing, but that's still a big old leap before 1%. What if that doesn't work? What if they do the whole line and it doesn't take them back? I keep thinking there's going to be something happen that is not going to make things go according to plan, because Okarin is convinced that if they undo this last email, it's going to take them to the past the 1%. But I don't know. There's something about, you would think there'd be some other hurdle involved, but I don't know. I wish they would have shown them undoing the lottery D-mail and then that leading this to change to 0.7 or something that's closer, because I guess in all fairness, Kurisu dying was a major event, her living. So I guess that would be enough to kick it to the 1%. I don't know. But if she goes back without telling Okarin, if she goes back and they change it back to the beta world line, she's not around. Can they actually make the time leap machine? Well, here's the thing that's kind of with that. And I guess I'm going to use this orange here, or blue rather. Can they go back? Because Okarin has all the memories. All the memories, which would include his conversations with Kurisu. So if she ends up getting taken out in the Beta World line and they get back to here, he technically could create a time machine to go back and stop her from doing that. Now, do I think he would do that? I don't know, because it's like the whole point was to delete the D-mail that alerted CERN, because this is the one that got CERN involved from the beginning. So if he goes back and creates a time machine, he's just created the loop all over again, and Mayuri's gonna die all over again. So I don't know if he would do that. I don't think he will do that. I think if they end up undoing this last email, then that's it. That's it. The only thing that will stop that is, what if they undo this D-mail and then it still leads to Mayuri's death? This would be, here's the thing. I'm not asking the series to choose the darkest timeline. I'm not asking them to do that. I'm not expecting them to do that. But I'm just saying, from my perspective, if I was making the darkest story I could out of this, I would have it to where they went back. Kurisu's no longer with us. This is like the grim worst ending. But Kurisu's no longer there. And Mayuri still dies. Because the point is, you can't cheat death. You can't do that. It's a fixed event. You can't stop it. And you stopping it is just delaying the inevitable. Now, I don't think the story will do that, because if that were the case, Kurisu would also be on a timeline as well. Although, to Amane's credit, she did say that in the end, Kurisu and him end up dying in the end in the original timeline. But I feel like if you go back and undo this and make Kurisu die to save Mayuri, you're not going to have Mayuri die after that, because that's the point. So, I don't know. So this is like scenario one. Kurisu makes the noble sacrifice and is like, yes, I will undo the D-mail with you. I'll undo it. I'm the mother of all time machines. I don't know that, but you know that. And we'll just save Mayuri that way. I mean, the other options, we kind of exhausted this episode a little bit. The other option is that Okarin tries another option. I guess my whole thing is, they want to undo the data by hacking into CERN. Can they not just delete the D-mail from CERN's system without undoing the D-mail itself? Is that not a possibility? Because I wondered, I was like, can they just delete the D-mail from CERN's server without undoing it? But here's the problem with that. This is why we have a paradox. This is why this episode's called Paradox Meltdown, because we're melting down all the paradoxes. Sure, you could, in theory, I guess, do that, but then that doesn't solve the problem of Mayuri dying, because you're still in this specific world line. So until you leave this world line and go back to where you came from, you're not going to stop Mayuri from dying. In this world line, Mayuri's the one that has to die, and Kurisu lives. So if you go back to the other world line, Mayuri lives, allegedly, supposedly, we think, and Kurisu dies. It's just going to really suck if that's not the case. And they go back and Mayuri ends up dying anyway. Then at that point, Okarin's like, F it. Let's just get all up on this Terminator style and go after CERN. You know, at that point he starts an actual war. I don't know. It is a paradox. This whole episode is a paradox. It's like, it's the trolley problem. Which do you choose? Do you choose, okay, Mr. Harem, you're down to 2 harem girls. Which do you save? The childhood friend or the new sexy assistant that you have chemistry with? Which do you save? You can only pick one, apparently. What do you do? I don't know. And at one point in the episode, Okarin tries to solve a third option, where he tries to find a third option, which he's like, I'll just kill myself. And at that point, that was the darkest the series, I think, has been, when Okarin's like, I'll just end it myself, and maybe that'll change something. And then Mayuri ends up jumping in and saving him in order to prevent that from happening. So the fates are not letting Okarin have that happen. So anyway, we start out this episode. I love the world lines, the red lines all connecting. But yeah, Kurisu apparently will die. So things that we need to know, I guess tying to this, is if he goes back, because our third line here is we have July 28th. Like, questions from that day. Who stabbed Kurisu? Who stabbed Kurisu? Why stab Kurisu? Is a good question. Who stabbed Kurisu? Why stab Kurisu? Was it Amane? I thought back at the beginning of the series that Amane would have been the one to stab Kurisu because she chose to go back to see her dad and then saw Kurisu and stabbed her before heading back to try to like prevent things from happening in the future. Which, but this is it. This is the interesting part, okay? This is the interesting part about all of it, right? So, also, a lot of blood in that stab scene, just saying. The thing is, if Kurisu died in that timeline, then the time machine landing there, wouldn't that be affected? Because if Kurisu dies in this timeline, that means she doesn't help CERN create the time machine in the future, or Daru and them aren't as impacted. So if you do something in the past, shouldn't it affect the future? But instead it creates a different world line. So I'm like, the whole stabbing thing is still a little bit interesting to me. I don't exactly know how it's all going to work out. I would think that would affect things. And because the satellite lands after she gets stabbed or during the stabbing, I don't know. But then there's also this idea with the stabbing, right? There's also the idea of how did Okarin warn her about being stabbed? Because she made that comment. She's like, well, I just saw you a second ago and you were warning me about something bad going to happen. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So how did a version of him get to her to talk to her about not getting stabbed when he got... Unless it's like Okarin from another world line coming into this world line and traveling back and forth. And is that going to be related to like Steins Gate 0? I don't know. We'll find out. Don't tell me. I don't want spoilers. But we'll see. But I just want you to know that that's on my mind as we go through this. There's just so many questions about that initial day. And I figured when you name an episode the beginning and the end, I figured season 1 we were going to tie back to this episode at the end of it. But we still have like 4 episodes to go. I don't know what we're going to get. So Okarin tells him not to hack. And then we get the OP. So he waited a good couple of days to try to figure out what to do. And honestly, I feel like Okarin sitting on the rooftop sizzling under the sun is like, it's akin to those don't do drugs commercials where you like crack an egg and it's like, this is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. That's basically Okarin. I feel like that's the case. I'm like... I understand why Okarin takes a couple days to think about what to do because he's been through so much and it's been like such a Groundhog Day scenario of him repeating the same couple of days over and over again that, yeah, no wonder he's kind of cooked. So in this one version, Daru has all of his money and he's going to the con, right? Now, did he get that money from the lottery, D-mail? I don't know. We don't ever touch base on that again. Who knows? It's also super weird that we keep going back to these scenarios. I mean, it's back to August 13th, around the time they finished the time leap machine. So it's funny that we keep going back to these one set of moments, but the lab kind of changes a little bit each time, like where things are settled does. Look, I need Okarin to hug Mayuri. I need him to hug Mayuri. If he hugs Kurisu and doesn't hug Mayuri, I will be mad at this man. I will be mad at this man. My biggest gripe with Okarin is I know he's crashed out. I know he's gone through so much. I know he's seen her die over and over again, and he's so traumatized and desensitized to it by now. But my dude, at the cemetery, you should have been hugging her. You should have hugged her on the rooftop. You should have hugged her at the convention. You should have been like, I get it. I understand why he's not doing these things because he's so burnt out and trying to save her, and he's almost dejected thinking that it's not going to work or know that it's not going to work. But I'm like, it's so frustrating for us as the audience because we're sitting here like, no, please hug her. what if none of this works out and you still lose her? Like, why are you not taking advantage of these moments to be with her if you care so much about her? It's just, ugh. Mayuri needs a head pat. She needs a hug, a head pat. She's absolutely precious. And when she gives him the damn hat and he's just sitting there looking so pathetic in the sun, it kills me. It kills me. And so here's the thing too. This is the thing as well. Since we've undone the D-mails with Moika and Ferris and Ruka, they don't recall the world line shifting. But we are starting to get into the realization that Mayuri remembers. She remembers all the other world lines where she's been killed and has died or been assassinated. She remembers all of that like a dream. Now, every time I have a dream where weird stuff like this happens, I'm going to think of that we've been switching world lines. Have any of you all had those dreams before? I have. I'm like, have we been switching world lines this whole time and I didn't even know it? What? But also you have Kurisu, who I love the visual at the end of this episode where there's like the red light blinking on the stairs as she's going back and forth. So she is starting to remember as well. So then there is the question, if they undo, and let's say Kurisu, if they undo the D-mail, Kurisu's going to die, so her remembering will not matter. But will Mayuri remember? And what about that distance between her and Okarin? If she remembers and asks who Kurisu was, and she finds out that because of him saving her, it caused the death of her to happen, and she remembers all those times that they were together, is Mayuri going to do something to herself out of just sadness and sorrow of Okarin trying to... I'm sorry. There is a part of me that is torn between two things. Either this series is going to end with Okarin saving everybody and it's going to be right as rain, hunky-dory, sunshine and rainbows, look at what we did. Or it's going to end up being a friggin' Shakespearean tragedy, being like friggin' Oedipus, and it's going to just be a horrific tragedy of a series. And I don't know which one it's going to end in. I can't decide. Maybe it'll be a mix of both. I don't know. So we go to the comic convention. I like the continuity that the girl that looks like Rini from Sailor Moon, as well as Puella from Madoka, that she's on I like the continuity of her being on the manga that they get. And of course, everybody's taking cosplay pictures. You know how it goes. But yeah, Okarin just looking so sad. And the thing is, he looks so sad because he's with her knowing that she's going to die later and he's going to have to witness it again. I want to talk about, though, the car that we see the mouse girl on it. The anime convention I went to earlier this last year, I had not seen all the cars with, like, the anime wraps on them. They're so freaking cool. I do like classic cars a bit, so seeing the anime with the wraps on them are really neat. But yeah, also a bunch of Love Exposure characters here doing the cosplay pictures. And Okarin is just the saddest sack. And I understand why. I get why he's so sad. It's just I feel so bad for Mayuri because she's supposed to be at this, if this were your last day on Earth, if this was your last day on Earth and you're at this convention and your best friend is with you, you would want that day to be so, I'm like, if I were Okarin, and I know why he's not like this because he's experienced this over and over again and he's just at this point so exhausted and torn down, he just can't muster the energy or ability to do it. I understand why. But if I were in Okarin's shoes, we as the audience, what we want him to do is, this is Mayuri's last day on Earth. Let her have the best time. Be yourself. Be the organ. But here's the thing. We say be yourself and act like the organization and act like you were when you were with her before, but you can't go back. It's like Okarin knows too much. He's learned too much. And he's been shown that all that stuff about the organization and all his mad scientist, Kyoma Hoenn, has just been a big farce compared to the real world. And he's hardened into this person who's so, like, just dejected and jaded that he can't go back to pretending anymore. And the thing is, Mayuri loved that about him. So it definitely makes a statement of people that have gone through major trauma and horrific events, like, it changes who you are on a fundamental level, and you can't go back to being exactly the same person you were before. Like, there's such a statement about that in this, and it's really sad. But yeah, she tries to cheer him up, and instead of him just like, and the fact that he's in the shadows too, instead of in the light, is pretty telling. Again, this series is really good about using shadows and light. And so meanwhile, we go back to the lab. And what does Kurisu say when they get back to the lab there? She's like, a notebook listing all the clubs that are there. And like, I don't see anything like that. The bookshelf, the second shelf, and they're like, oh, stay away from the second shelf. And that's what she sees, like, I'm assuming these are all Daru's, like, 3D sim related games, because Okarin is addicted to science, not boobs. And she's like, yeah, so the club list. Okay, the Komima club list. She's like, I'm going to sue. Okay, that's what they were looking for. There we go. So yeah, that's when Okarin calls back. Okay. And he's telling her not to do the D-mail, but he just can't bring himself. I'm glad that he told her in person. I was afraid for a second he was going to tell her on the phone. And I was going to be like, that's not the best time to tell someone that you've seen an alternate future where they die, so... Or an alternate past, rather, which is kind of crazy. And then we see that damn cicada on the ground dead, like you do. So, yeah. A lot of this episode was just, like, atmosphere and creating this, like, tense feeling and melancholy. And it felt like not the calm before the storm, but, like, the buildup of the storm. It felt like a buildup. And has me very worried about next episode. So, like I felt the last several weeks. One thing I do want to note is someone was talking about Dr. Pepper specifically, and that Dr. Pepper is actually not as common to find in Japan. Interesting. But that in Akihabara, it's actually like one of the few places that you can find it a lot. So I'm like, a regional cuisine. How intriguing. So yeah, and then as they go back, Okarin is just, it's the curse of, it's why I would never want to know. Like, some people are like, would you want to know when you're going to die? No, not at all. Nope, wouldn't want to know. You know why? Because, why I wouldn't want to know? Because I'd be doing what Okarin is doing. I'd be worried about it 24/7. I would be worried about it nonstop. And being worried about it would cause me to not be able to enjoy anything out of life. And that's kind of like a true thing. If you're worried about something nonstop, like, if you're worried about it, then it's just going to, like, put a damper on your experiences. Like Mayuri, she doesn't know, and she's able to still, like, live her life, even though she's having more and more conflicting, like, nightmarish scenarios happen to her that she thinks are dreams. But she isn't worried about it, and she's living her life. Okarin is so caught up in the moment, knowing she's going to die, that he's not witnessing her being right next to him. And it's terrifying. Yep. So then Mayuri talks about, like, if something's wrong, you can tell her. And she's like, I just wish you would be like you were before. And he tries to be a little bit, and it's fine, but you can tell he just doesn't quite believe in it anymore. So because he doesn't believe in it, it doesn't work. And then the damn car shows up, and the car chases him, and she said the watch stops, and he tries to save her, and then he's like, he tries to outrun the car, and then he's like, you know what? Screw it. Maybe if I turn back around, if I get run over here, if I let myself die, then something will have to change. And then we see this hourglass and this image with both, like, Kurisu and Mayuri side by side, forming this, like hourglass with their beings, being like, he's like, if I take myself out of the equation, maybe one of them will live. And that's kind of the third, maybe that's another option. I don't know if that's going to work, but I don't know if he's going to go through with that, but he's like, it'll have to. I never want to see Okarin look that dejected ever again. He looked terrified in that moment, which he's about to, like, make himself get run over by a car. I don't want to ever see that again. And that's when Mayuri, like, jumps in to save him. Nope. I'm glad they didn't show a bunch of blood from her getting hit by a car. At this point, they're like, y'all have suffered enough. They're like, at this point, you've witnessed her die how many times? You've suffered enough. We're not going to show you her getting run over by the car and it being bloody. But damn. The melodrama of her reaching for him, the melodrama of him just being absolutely heartbroken, and then her like reaching for him saying, I hope I was helpful. The fudge. Show. Why? It's so damn sad. Every time I think, oh, her dying isn't going to be as sad as it was before. No, it is. And him catching her hand. Shut up. And then like that shot of him holding her in his arms, like against like the side of the wall where it's like just the light on him. That was so freaking tragic. And then him carrying her corpse up to the apartment before he does the time leap. And he has all these memories. And the thing is, if he travels to the other world line, this is my fear too. One of my fears as well is that even if all goes according to cake, even if he travels, I mean, two scenarios. One, even if Kurisu dies and he saves Mayuri and travels to that other world line, he has all of those memories retained of everything that has happened with all of these characters. It would either make him go crazy, or is he going to be just as despondent and sad around Mayuri because now Kurisu is gone as he was in this episode. And two, if they do all of this and somehow get everything saved to where Kurisu and Mayuri are okay in the end, if some kind of cake, have your cake and eat it too scenario happens, he still has all the memories of them nearly dying or dying. Is he going to be able to live life with them to the fullest, or is he constantly going to be freaked out at every step of the way, wondering if things are going to reverse, or if time is going to catch up, or if it would have even mattered? Because I'm not going to lie, if I was in his shoes and every day Mayuri's death had been extended an extra day, but it still happened, I would probably spend every subsequent day after the end when you think she's going to die, every subsequent day I would be kind of worried, what if she dies today? Like, I would be thinking that. And I don't think that it's unusual that someone would think of that if they'd gone through everything Okarin had gone through. So it's like, everything he's done, even if you manage to win in the end and conquer time and get to make the things right in the world again, you have all these memories. You're like a deity at this point. You're like a time guardian at this point. Are you going to be able to function as a human being normally with these people and have these encounters with Mayuri that are normal and be able to be your friend and everything? Or are you going to constantly be worried or sad at what has happened in the past? I'm like, I just feel like there's no happily ever after at the end of this series. I don't think there can be. I don't know how there can be. Unless he just forgets everything. Unless he goes, when he goes to that other world line, if he forgets everything once he crosses the threshold and then it just starts fresh, that's the only way I could see there being a happy ending. Because otherwise he's carrying all of these memories with him to that other world line, and how would that not make you go crazy? Yeah. When she's like, we have to talk, he's like, okay, we're going back in time. And you think he's just going to talk in that moment, but instead, when she looks over, he's crying and has broken down. I wish we could have saw it. I know that we know the implication that he's crying, and she says as much later. I wish we could have seen a shot of it. I'm not a masochist and want to see him suffer, but I also kind of want to see it. So yeah. So then we're back to, time moves forward, back to the 13th. And he's up on the roof again. This time, though, it's Kurisu instead of Mayuri. And she's asking him what's going on. And he doesn't want to tell her about what's happening. So she asks in this moment, she's like, you need to just tell me. And she's like, we've come this far. And he's like, this far? That moment where he's like, you have no idea how far I have gone and not gone anywhere in the past several days. And just seeing Okarin in the shadows, breaking down and losing it as he recalls everything that's happened. Like, I thought Okarin had crashed out in episode 19, but I feel like this is a pretty big fall. Sacrificing all their hopes and dreams have led me here. Because I think at this point, he's realized what the pattern is. His hopes and dreams are saving Mayuri and being able to be with her. That's his hopes and dreams. And in order for those to happen, everybody else has to sacrifice their hopes and dreams. So Kurisu, her hopes and dreams of becoming like famous and having this influence on science like her father, that's all going to have to come to terms now. And she's going to have to sacrifice that to let him get what he wants. And he's finally realizing how crazy that is. And then he almost breaks the phone, which I was like, well, that's not good. And she stops him. I feel like her stopping him is a sign that I feel like Kurisu's own curiosity, her own prowess, and her own intellectualism will, I don't know. Because part of me is like, I think she would go through with it. But the other part of me is like, does she want the time machine to be created so she won't go through with it? Tis the question. Or will she think of a third option that we haven't thought of yet? I like the satellite and all the wires against the sun being conflicted to show like how sketchy this all is. But yeah, poor Okarin. And then she's like, you need to tell me. Just tell me what it is. And that's when he says on July 28th, he's like, on July 28th, we went to that seminar and you were stabbed in the floor and I sent the first email. And that's how we got, and then he explains it. So that makes sense now. He says that we traveled from the one world line to this one, deleting that message from CERN's database and returning to the beta world line. I guess I don't understand how deleting the message from the database returns them to the world line, because does deleting the message from CERN's database prevent it from you having sent it? I guess that's where I'm a little bit confused as to, but I'm going to wait till I watch the English dub. Maybe it'll be explained better in the English dub. But he's like, this whole action moved us to an alternate world line. If we alter this and go back to where we were from the Alpha world line, then you're dead in that world line. My other thing too with this is, my only other thing is, this was the threshold, right? Because we had the Alpha world line. And in the Alpha world line, Kurisu was dead. Kurisu was stabbed. And then the Okarin sent the D-mail that allowed him to cross over to this beta world line where things are all different. My thing is, if he sends the D-mail and undoes it, it's like Okarin travels back to this world line where Mayuri lives and Kurisu does not. So, technically, if that were the case, because Okarin, as far as we know, is the only one with the reading Steiner. He's the only one that travels through these world lines. So, in this beta world line, that's how him and Kurisu, because Kurisu was alive in this world line, right? In this one, Mayuri dies. And in this one, Kurisu lives. Now, does Mayuri really live in the Alpha world line? Well, we don't know that. We don't know that, do we? We're just assuming that she does. But she probably does. But we're just assuming. It depends on how tragic the story wants to be. But if Okarin goes back to this world line, then doesn't the Kurisu in the beta world line, doesn't she stay alive and time moves on? She just won't know Okarin as he is now? That part's a little bit odd to me. We'll talk about it. The whole time leaping of him traveling from world lines, but nobody else. I don't know, because in my mind, the beta, alpha, sigma world lines are all different world lines where things are affected by your actions as they would be, but he's wanting to go from one where Mayuri always dies in this world line to the world line where she doesn't. So I'm like, I'm going to be interested to see how they explain that and what ends up happening in the next 4 episodes, but I'm wondering like how much of a difference it would make. And yeah, if I were Kurisu, this would be horrifying, because basically she's like, in this world line, I'm alive. And that world line you want to go back to, I'm dead. So, and Okarin, I think she understands Okarin's plight. I think she understands why Okarin doesn't want to make the decision, because he's all but saying he likes her, but he hasn't come out and said it yet. Yeah. And then I think, the thing about it is Kurisu knows Mayuri better than, with the exception of Ruka, Kurisu knows Mayuri better than Amane and Moika and Ferris. So those 3 individuals making their decision to undo the D-mails it's like to save Mayuri, those didn't come off as kind of like as, you know, heavy because they didn't really know Mayuri, so they were just making those decisions based on their relationship with Okarin. But with Kurisu, and Ruka's makes sense because Ruka is friends with Mayuri, but Kurisu is as well. And so Kurisu hearing this phone conversation and seeing how Mayuri is, I think does persuade her decision just a little bit. And she tells him to go hang out with Mayuri so that he's not sitting there worrying about her. And I guess she has to figure out what she's going to do. Is she going to sacrifice herself or not? And then he's like, well, if she's not at the convention, where could she be? And he goes to the gravestone, and that's where she's at. This was freaking sad. This was really sad. This whole scene where she's telling the grandma, whenever Mayuri gets to the parts where she's like, oh, I should stop talking about sad stuff. Let's talk about happy stuff now. Gutted my heart, snapped it in half, stomped on it. It's just so sad. And then she reveals that she's starting to remember things, but she thinks that they're dreams. And Okarin hears all of it. He knows exactly what's happening. He knows that she's starting to, like, the world lines are all starting to catch up. It's like he's going to have to make a decision. And if the thing is, if he doesn't make the decision to go back and undo that D-mail, is Mayuri going to start realizing that these aren't just dreams? Is she going to start catching on that he's been using the time leap machine like she told him not to, and that these are all moments he's experienced? But I hate when people say they don't want to be a burden to others. I hate that. I'm like, you're not a burden to anybody. And Mayuri is not a burden to him. He loves her. That's why he's doing it. I get worried that she's going to think that she's being a burden, and that if she wasn't there, he'd be able to be with Kurisu. Because you can tell in the conversation she has that she is like, oh, Okarin can talk with Kurisu, and they talk about all this complicated stuff I don't know. So it's like Mayuri is shipping Okarin and Kurisu. So I'm afraid that Mayuri will be like, well, but I want you to be with her. And if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. You guys can be together. I don't know how it's good. It just, the tension and buildup of what's going to happen, this episode exploring that has been so terrifying. And I'm like, then we see Mayuri going to his lab for the first time. They grew up together, but it was like when she was in junior high, you know, or high school, and showed up. I love the conversation she has about when you're with somebody in silence, but it's like a comfortable silence. Because there's a difference. I don't like awkward silences. If I'm out with friends, I like talking about things and keeping the conversation going. I'm always afraid that the silence is not going to be the comfortable silence. It's going to be awkward. So I always try to make small talk. But in this episode, Mayuri shows that, like, when you're really in tune with somebody and it's really going well, you can be in that kind of like comfortable silence and it's fine. And I love how she describes time passing slowly but gently. And that's not what's been happening in this series. Time has not been passing slowly but gently. Maybe at the very start, but not after episode 10. No. And I feel like that's what's been missing, is that, you know, if Mayuri knew what he was doing, she'd be like, hey, how about we just hang out together? Don't worry about all that other stuff. It'll happen when it happens. And then it feels so crazy now, him doing the Hoenn Kiyoma routine with the organization. That feels so wild now. And whenever she's like, there were 4 directors of the organization, I'm like, feels like Bleach, right? You know, there's 4 like top brass in the organization, and that damn metal uppa on the window, the condensation. And it's showing like the little trickles of condensation out of the perfect little square, like it's just all muddling, like with the time leap and everything. Just, yep, horrible. So yeah, the fact that he didn't hug her in this damn scene makes me so mad. I wanted him to hug her so bad. And he tries to play like in the organization, but it's just like everything that's happened, he's not the same person he was before. And her constant death has literally shrouded her death has like made this big wall between them. And I don't know, even if he goes back to the other world line, I don't know if it'll be mended, or if he will be constantly worried she's going to die in that world line too. What do you do? Also worth noting is that in this world line, Suzuha has left. Suzuha is left at this point, which makes sense because they undid that email to where she did go back in the past. So she's left. And we can see how Kurisu is going back, retracing her steps. And then she gets back. I want to go back there. She went back, retraced her steps up the floor. Yeah, the 7th floor, mind you. And then she gets back to where she originally was. Up the stairs to the 7th floor, to the 8th floor, and then where she would have been stabbed at. Oh, what is that red line there? What are those? Are those numbers? Are they binary codes? Yeah, they're binary code, is what it looks like. Huh. Yeah, and all the light there. So, question is, will she remember what happened to her? Here's the thing. If Kurisu could remember what happened to her in that previous world line, if she could remember that, because, you know, we see the world lines are starting to merge here. If Kurisu could start remembering that and could let him know who the culprit was that stabbed her, then they possibly could prevent that from happening. But that doesn't solve the problem of the D-mail getting to CERN. So I felt like, you know, we all knew this was coming back to this point, that we were going to go back to the first episode, and we have 4 more episodes to do that. But I'm going to be honest, there are so many options of what could happen. I don't know which route the series is going to go, and I don't know if the series is going to make a happier choice or a more tragic choice, or what the bittersweet in-between would be. And I'm kind of okay and excited that I don't know the answer to that, but I don't know. It's going to be hard waiting until episode 22 and not going ahead and watching it. It's going to be hard, y'all. So we're just going to see where we get. I may have to watch ahead. I may have to watch 1 episode ahead. I've been good about waiting until comments come in for this episode, the episode before, but I may have to go ahead and watch episode 22 because I may need to know what happens. So we will cross that bridge when we come to it. But in the meantime, I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below about this episode. It was heartbreaking. It was so sad. And I don't like seeing Okarin and Mayuri be sad. And now with Kurisu, she's been growing closer and closer to him. I don't like her being sad either. So anyway, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah. Whiteboard Kun and I will be back next week and see what Okarin and Kurisu's decisions are, perhaps, with episode 22 of Steins Gate. Haha, and I'll see you then. Bye.